I'm on record saying that Keon Ellis was one of the best stories in the NBA this season, and I still do feel that way. But was Keon Ellis the best part of the Sacramento Kings season? I'm continuing with my Kings season report cards, grades for Keon Ellis, Davion Mitchell, and Trey Lyles right here on Locked On Kings.
You are Locked On Kings, your daily Sacramento Kings podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
And now, ladies and gentlemen, it is that time for another episode of Locked On Kings.
Hello and welcome into Locked On Kings, your podcast hub for Sacramento Kings coverage all off-season long. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. Again, that's $150 with any winning $5 bet. Visit FanDuel.com/LockedOn to get started. My name is Matt George. I have the privilege of being your host here. I'm a Sacramento sports anchor and reporter for ABC 10 News here in the California capital. Continuing on with our Sacramento Kings report card series. Now, if you've missed my episodes earlier on this season, so far I've given out grades for De'Aaron Fox, Domantas Sabonis, and Malik Monk. I gave De'Aaron an A-, Domantas an A, and Malik Monk an A. And then, more recent episode, I gave out grades for Keegan Murray, Harrison Barnes, and Kevin Huerter. I gave Keegan Murray, I think, a B+. I gave Harrison Barnes a C, and I gave, or maybe it was a C+, and I gave Kevin Huerter a D. So now I'm adding 3 more to that list: Keon Ellis, Davion Mitchell, and Trey Lyles. So let's just jump into these. And as always, I want to hear your grades and your responses to my grades, whether you think they're too high, too low, what grade you would give them, and why. So feel free to share at any time. You can do so on Twitter or X at MattGeorgeSac. You can email me, mattgeorgesports@gmail.com. Or, of course, if you're watching on YouTube, leave your grades and your comments in the comment section down below. Let's start with Keon Ellis. I gave Keon Ellis an A. Easy. Probably the easiest grade that I'm going to give anybody. No other grade is reasonable or acceptable for a player who goes from a two-way contract to a deserved starter. He didn't just start out of necessity, which he did at some point. He deserved to be the Kings starter by the end of the season. And I'm pretty convinced that even if Kevin Huerter was healthy, I think Keon Ellis might have still beaten him out for that starting spot by the end of the season and going into the play-in tournament. Maybe not, but I'm just going to speculate and assume that would have happened because of the way the Kings were playing and how important Keon Ellis was to the Kings' defensive improvement, especially in the final third of the season. So Keon Ellis gets an A from me. The only way he would have gotten an A+, which is literally a perfect season, I guess, is if he not only came into the scene, but exploded into the scene as like a future superstar, which of course he's not that. So getting an A+ grade is pretty much impossible. But an A is nothing to turn your nose up at by any means. Just a phenomenal season for Keon, and it started with him stepping into the starting lineup really early in the year. Remember when De'Aaron Fox went down, and Keon Ellis steps into the starting lineup in a play-in tournament game against the Oklahoma City Thunder. The same Thunder who, they were off to a great start at the time. We know the Oklahoma City Thunder are one of the best teams in the Western Conference right now. Of course, they're still playing in the playoffs, finished with the number 1 seed in the Western Conference. So the Kings took on that OKC Thunder team early on in the year without De'Aaron Fox in a in-season tournament game. And the Kings won that game, and Keon Ellis was a big part of that. This season, he went 13-8 as a starter. That's just the regular season. That goes up to 14-9 if you include the 2 play-in games that he started for. He's quickly and easily established himself in Sacramento as one of the top 3 defenders on this Kings team. Defensive rating kind of tells a little bit of a different story. He's the 4th best and fourth lowest defensive rating on the team. Lowest is a good thing in terms of defensive rating. Offensive rating, the higher the better. Defensive rating, the lower the better. Technically, JaVale McGee has the best/lowest defensive rating on the team at 108.7, but we all know how little JaVale McGee played. Second on the team is Alex Len with a defensive rating of 111.1. Third on the team is actually Domantas Sabonis with a 112.5. Keon Ellis is fourth with a 113.4. De'Aaron Fox fifth with a 113.9. But at least defensive rating-wise, Keon Ellis, where he belongs in the upper echelon of players. You can kind of take JaVale McGee out of there, and really you could kind of take Alex Len out of there to some extent as well, even though Len played more than McGee by the end of the season. I will say this too, and if we're talking about high volume of defensive possessions, it's Sabonis number 1, Keon number 2, and Fox number 3. Now, I think those numbers are a little bit misleading too, because I would by no means call Domantas Sabonis the best defender on this roster. To me, the top 3 defenders on this roster are Keegan Murray, Keon Ellis, and initially I was going to say Davion Mitchell, but De'Aaron Fox played so well and led the NBA in steals. Maybe De'Aaron Fox is 3 and Davion Mitchell is a really close 4. But the point is, Keon Ellis is a part of that group. He's established himself as a part of that group, and he did so very, very quickly. And he's right at the center of Sacramento's defensive improvement at the end of the year, right? We're going to talk about this too when I give Davion Mitchell his grade coming up in the next segment. But one of the things Mike Brown figured out in the second half, really the last third of the season, is 3-guard lineups and combinations that worked. And Keon Ellis was always involved in those combinations, whether it was with Davion, with De'Aaron, with Malik. A combination of all 3 of those guys. Had Kevin Huerter played, I'm sure he would have combined with him and did combine with him a couple of times, right? Keon Ellis was interchangeable. You could put him in any of those 3-guard lineup sets, and he did his job really, really well, which is defend at a high level. He was at the center of that defensive improvement, like I said, and then shooting the basketball. His 3-point shooting, he shot 41.7% from 3-point range on nearly 3 attempts per game. I would argue that maybe he should have been shooting more. But on the offensive side of the ball, he had a clear skill set. He spaced the floor still, which is how the Kings like to run their offense and how they need to run their offense with guys like Domantas Sabonis and De'Aaron Fox that take up so much space around the middle and want to attack the rim. You need guys that are going to help you on the defensive end and space the floor. Keon Ellis did that to an abundance this year. And I think this is a major point of talking about not just Keon Ellis' grade, but the success of the Sacramento Kings going forward. Keon takes a lot of the early defensive responsibilities off of the shoulders of De'Aaron Fox, right? In years past, if the Kings wanted to try to lock down the opposing team's best guard early, they threw De'Aaron Fox on him. Now, De'Aaron could do that job, but that would also take so much energy from De'Aaron and focusing on the defensive end of the floor that sometimes we'd see the offense struggle. I think that's one of the major reasons why we saw De'Aaron Fox last season be such a great fourth quarter scorer, but it felt like he was not necessarily limping into the fourth quarter, but it felt like he was saving himself for the fourth quarter offensively, right? The first 3 quarters, you'd see less of De'Aaron Fox looking to score, and a lot of that had to do with the responsibilities that he had on the defensive end. De'Aaron was very honest and open talking about it. He said, look, I'm the only top-tier guard in the league that is guarding the opposing team's top-tier guard, while all those opposing team top-tier guards are hiding on the defensive end or not guarding De'Aaron Fox to save themselves on the offensive end. De'Aaron couldn't really get away with that until this season because of Keon Ellis and how Keon stepped in and took some of that responsibility away from Fox and took some of that responsibility off of Fox's shoulders. Now, the question is, this was a great season for Keon. Is he truly long-term starter material for the Sacramento Kings? And go a step further. Is he long-term starter material on a team with future championship aspirations? Like, can you close your eyes and picture a starting 5 playing for an NBA championship in the NBA Finals for the Sacramento Kings featuring Keon Ellis as your starting 2 guard? I think a lot of us probably aren't there yet, and I understand that. Maybe we need to see a little bit more out of Keon. He did everything this season to earn the right to obviously come back next year and see how he can build upon this great season that he had. But I also look at Keon and I look at him the same way as Gabe Vincent. And I've talked about this before, right? Think about last year's playoffs, right? The 2023 playoffs. The Miami Heat go on this amazing run from playing team to making it to the NBA Finals. Now, ultimately, they didn't win, of course. They lost to the Denver Nuggets. But Gabe Vincent was a massive part of that team. Gabe Vincent started off in a very similar way to Keon Ellis, starting actually in Stockton with the Stockton Kings before the Heat got their hands on him and turned him into what he is. And then, unfortunately, he took a dip going to the Los Angeles Lakers and dealing with injuries this year. But I look at Gabe Vincent and the impactful type player that Gabe Vincent was with a Miami Heat team that made an NBA Finals run, and I go, why can't Keon Ellis be that for Sacramento? So I definitely think the idea of Keon being a starter for a championship contending team is not out of the realm of possibility. But we probably need to see more. But ultimately, based off of what we saw this year, yeah, there's no other grade that I can give Keon Ellis other than an A. Today's episode of the Locked On Kings podcast is brought to you by DoorDash. Time is ticking, everybody. Mother's Day is Sunday. But don't worry, if you've waited to the last minute, I have a solution for you. It is never too late to show your mom love this Mother's Day with DoorDash. Surprise mom with flowers, gadgets, self-care essentials, all in one place, delivered right to her door. Whether it's the mother of your kids, the mom that raised you, the mom in your life, whoever it may be, DoorDash has gifts for everybody. It's a wide range of gifts, different stores and venues and locations that you can order those gifts from, and again, have them delivered right to her door. So she wakes up and there's a package out front. There's a gift for her out front for Mother's Day right outside your door. Or, of course, you can have them delivered to you. Then you can wrap them up and give them to her yourself. DoorDash gives you versatility. DoorDash also gives you help finding those gifts. If you're like me, maybe you struggle finding the right thing to give someone. Maybe you're bad at coming up with gift-giving ideas. DoorDash can help you out with that as well. There's so many great things that you can get on DoorDash. So get all your Mother's Day gifts all in one place and get 50% off of your next order, up to $15 when you spend $15 or more on your next flour, convenience, grocery, or retail order now with code LOCKEDONNBA. That's LOCKEDONNBA. Order DoorDash today. Terms apply. Locked On Kings is also brought to you by LinkedIn Jobs. Now, when you're hiring for your small business, you want to find quality professionals that are right for the role. That's why you have to check out LinkedIn Jobs. LinkedIn Jobs is the tools to help you find the right professionals for your team faster and for free. LinkedIn isn't just another job board. LinkedIn has a vast network of more than 1 billion professionals, which makes it the best place for you to hire. It gives you access to professionals you can't find anywhere else. LinkedIn does all that while making the process easy and intuitive. Hiring is easy when you have that many quality candidates. It's so easy, in fact, that 86% of small businesses get a qualified candidate within 24 hours. It's like having a professional scouting department right there at your fingertips. LinkedIn knows that small businesses are wearing so many hats and might not have the time or resources to hire. LinkedIn is constantly finding ways to make that process easier, and even has helped launch a feature that helps you write job descriptions, making the process even easier and quicker. That's why 2.5 million small businesses use LinkedIn for hiring. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/LockedOnNBA. That's linkedin.com/LockedOnNBA to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply. From one defensive guard to another, Davion Mitchell. I'm very interested to read your grades for Davion Mitchell, and I will admit to you that my grade for Davion completely changed with the final third of the season. Completely. If you were to listen back in, let's say January, late December, early January, right? If you were to listen to Locked On Kings, there was probably a moment where, without directly saying I'm done with Davion Mitchell, it sounded like I was done with Davion Mitchell. And I don't mean that like he sucked or he's a terrible player. I just didn't think it was working. He didn't fit, right? He has all this great opportunity or all these great assets on the defensive end of the floor. But there were times that even when the Kings had to focus on the defensive improvement, Davion was still not seeing the floor. Because as good as Off Night was on the defensive end, offensively, he wasn't giving you anything and he wasn't fitting to where he was a detriment to have. So much of a detriment on that end that the defensive improvement that he clearly brings was not worth it. Again, it's not because I didn't think that Davion Mitchell had offensive talent. I just didn't think he knew how to be effective offensively with the Sacramento Kings this year. And I'll be completely honest, I didn't know if I don't think the Kings knew how to use him properly either. I think both sides were trying to figure it out together. And then it happened. The final third of the season, he went from the offense keeping him off the court to impactful on both ends. And it's because of these 3-guard lineups, right? These 3-guard lineups allowed the Kings to move away from a choose one or the other, Keon or Davion, and go, why not both? And while Keon's responsibility offensively was to space the floor and knock down threes, Davion's responsibility was to use some of the intangibles that he has that are a little bit underrated or he hasn't gotten the opportunity to show off enough. I'm talking about his speed and quickness. Now, when you compare anybody to De'Aaron Fox, that's really, really tough. But Davion Mitchell is a speedy, quick point guard. He's very quick. With and without the basketball, he can move. He's got underrated dribble moves, and he got the opportunity to show that off in the final third of the season with increased minutes. I also think the Kings, using these 3-guard lineups to give him more of consistent playing time, played a major role too, because I'm not going to pretend it was easy for Davion Mitchell to not know how many minutes or if he was going to play at all on any given night. Come in, play a handful of minutes here or there, and have a short leash if he screws up, or maybe he gets into a little bit of a rhythm, but the very next game he does not play because of some other reason Mike Brown came up with. That's hard for a player to get into any kind of flow, right? So, again, I think it was a figuring out process of both sides. So what grade do I give Davion Mitchell? He gets a B for me, and he was in D range. Right? He was in D range, D to even flirting with F at times. I thought Davion Mitchell's days in Sacramento were done. I just did not think it fit. I did not think it worked. And I thought the Kings and Davion Mitchell were heading straight for a mutual parting of ways. I just thought that was what's going to happen. Now, I think Davion Mitchell has trade value. Davion Mitchell might be the player that the Kings add to a Kevin Huerter or Harrison Barnes type trade to sweeten the deal a little bit to get a team to say yes. I'm not rooting for that to happen, but I'm saying it might happen because Davion does have value. I know for a fact from talking to people around the league that there are teams and fan bases certainly that have interest in Davion Mitchell. They're not willing to trade an absurd amount or an absurd package for him. Let's not get too far ahead of ourselves. It's not like a team that's going to go, yeah, give us Davion Mitchell as the primary piece that we're getting back in a deal, right? If the Kings are moving Davion Mitchell for a sizable, noticeable upgrade, again, he's either being attached to Harrison or Kevin's money, or he's being attached to multiple first-round draft picks, or maybe even both, right? So I'm not saying that Davion Mitchell is guaranteed to be a King going forward, but I'm at this point in time saying that if Davion Mitchell remains a Sacramento King going into next season, I'm excited about it. I am, because of what he showed through the final third of the season. He made much better decisions with the basketball, really showed off that mid-range game and how he's improved with his mid-range jumper. He improved, went up from 32% to 36% from three-point range. If Davion Mitchell was a 36% three-point shooter every single season for the remainder of his career, that would be a great thing for whatever team he was playing for. If it could get better, fantastic. But 36% is fine with me for a player like Davion Mitchell. Now the question is, was that just a hot stretch? Because we've seen Mitchell finished the season on a hot stretch before. Think back to his rookie year, right? I think De'Aaron Fox either got hurt or the Kings just kind of shut him down at the end of the season, right? That was after the Domantas Sabonis trade. I'm pretty sure Fox got hurt. And Davion Mitchell finished out that season, had some really good performances, made us excited going into his second season, which was ultimately not that great. Was this end of the season just a hot stretch for Davion Mitchell, or is what he was for the Kings in the second half of the season to end the year, is that what he can be for basically full 82 games? And are the Sacramento Kings able to give him the consistent playing time that he deserves to be able to show that? Because they can't expect that from him if they're going to treat him the same way they did at the first half of the season, which is, hey, here's a handful of minutes here, and then you're not playing the next night. And then you'll play 3 games in a row and then sit for 5 games, and then play for 4 games and then sit for 2. Like, the Kings need to be consistent with Davion if he's going to be consistent production-wise for them. So can Davion be that? I still do have serious doubts and reservations about Davion Mitchell being the second primary facilitator and the backup point guard if Malik Monk leaves, right? Like, that is a massive shoe or pair of shoes for Davion to fill. It's not that I don't think he can do it. I don't think he can do it at the level of Malik Monk. And expecting him to step in and just take that on if Malik does leave, I think the Sacramento Kings, I mean, it's no surprise. The Kings lose Malik Monk, even if they use their $12 million that they have to replace him. They're just they're a worse basketball team. And I don't mean to turn this into a negative thing when I'm trying to be positive about Davion Mitchell, but if Malik Monk leaves and Davion Mitchell is the Kings' answer as their backup point guard to do the things that Malik Monk did off the bench with the second unit, I don't have faith that that's going to work. I don't. His assists over his 3 seasons have dropped. 4.2 his rookie year, 2.3 last year, 1.9 this year. Now, to be fair, his minutes have also steadily dropped every single season of his career. So maybe with more minutes, those assists could go up. I have serious reservations about Davion Mitchell as the backup point guard of the future for Sacramento, especially in a scenario where they're replacing Malik Monk. That being said, how Davion ended the season was fantastic, and if he can be that for basically a full season for the Sacramento Kings, I'm a big fan of that. So Davion Mitchell gets a B for me. Today's episode of the Locked On Kings podcast is also brought to you by Monopoly Go. If you've heard me talk about Monopoly Go before, you understand how addicted that I've gotten to this game. If you're not playing it yet, you should be. Don't worry, it's different enough from OG Monopoly that if that board game and the length of time that it takes you to play that board game scares you away, like my wife, for example, my wife will not play Monopoly. She absolutely refuses to play Monopoly. But I got her to download Monopoly Go, play some co-op with me on Monopoly Go. Yeah, we're on the same team. She's hooked now. She's playing on her own. She's playing with her friends. It has nothing to do with me at this point. She's replaced me on Monopoly Go. She's also gotten a big ego, too, thinking she can beat me. In Monopoly Go, you can team up with friends for timed tournaments where you work together to build up each other's boards. The more you win together, the more awesome prizes that you unlock, like stickers that you can collect and trade in to complete albums and get big prizes based off that. You can get cool new playing pieces to travel the board with, hilarious emojis for taunting your friends when you smash their buildings or heist their vaults. Yeah, that's a real thing in Monopoly Go. Plus, Monopoly Go feels new and exciting every day with constantly changing tournaments and challenges. A ton include their own unique mini games like digging for treasure or a robot pachinko machine. And there's always new timed events to help you win big, like massive multipliers for everything you win or for rent frenzies. There's always something fun to discover in Monopoly Go, so get off the bench and get into the action. Go download the app for free on Google Play or the App Store and game on. Last but not least, Trey, Lyles. Now, I'm very curious, too, about your guys' responses to my grade here, because so many of you that I've seen so far in this series have said that I'm grading too easily. I'm grading too lightly. I'm giving too many high grades for players on the team that ultimately miss the playoffs. I feel like I might be being too harsh towards Trey Lyles, and I'll talk my way through it here. I couldn't find a way to give Trey Lyles any grade higher than a C. He was never going to be a D for me or anything like that because he just had a solid average season. I gave him a C because of this. I couldn't find a way to sum it up better than this. Overall, this was just a non-memorable season for Trey Lyles. Last year, the first full season of Trey in Sacramento, even though he averaged like 0.3 points per game more than he averaged this season, it just felt like his impact was bigger and more noticeable last year than it was this year. And again, maybe I'm being too harsh on the guy because the numbers will suggest that they've been relatively the same, or in a lot of ways, he actually slightly improved for the Kings. I also think injuries had a big part to play in this, right? He only played 58 games for the Kings this year. He just dealt with little nagging injuries, right? He started the season missing a good chunk of the first bit of the season with a hamstring injury or something like that. I honestly don't remember. Got hurt again in the middle parts of the season. Like, Trey Lyles was in and out of the lineup with injuries, and that disrupted him from getting really any sort of rhythm this year. I still have absolute full confidence that Trey is a ideal backup big/forward on this roster, right? I have no desire at all for the Kings to get rid of him. I am very happy to see Trey Lyles continue as a Sacramento King, right? They signed him to a contract extension, or a new contract rather, last offseason. So in my opinion, Trey Lyles isn't going anywhere. He shouldn't go anywhere, and I have no problems with Trey continuing to be a member of the Sacramento Kings. I just felt that this year wasn't very memorable. I felt it wasn't very noticeable. His scoring, again, was basically the same, 7 points per game. His minutes, his three-point percentage, his rebounds all increased this year, so he had a bigger role and he did more outside of just scoring the basketball. But I just feel like I needed more impactful performances from Trey. He had 19 games this season with 10 or more points. Again, 19 out of 58 that he played. 19 of them with 10 or more points. 6 of them with 15 or more points. And his season high was 19 points. He did that twice. Now, Matt, realistically, what are you expecting from Trey? Are you expecting him to have 20 games with 15 or more points? Okay, no, I'm not going to go that far. Are you expecting him to have a 30-point night? It would be nice, but no. But I don't know, 19 games with 10 or more points, I just feel like he needs more big games than that. And again, I could be being unfair because that's just saying, hey, average more points. That's basically what I'm saying. Just average more points or have more big games that will ultimately positively, in fact, impact your points per game average. I don't want him to average 7 points per game by scoring 20 a boatload of nights and then 0 or 1 or 2 the rest of them. I don't want that. You'd rather him be consistent. But I know Trey Lyles is capable of having more than 19 games in double-digit scoring. Part of his role off the bench, and again, I feel like this is actually me speaking to a team issue and less of a Trey Lyles issue because the Kings team as a whole struggled offensively this season. Part of them improving on the offensive end is, I think, just getting a little more offense out of Trey. Again, maybe my expectations were too high for Trey coming into this year. This is where you can share with me. But I'm giving Trey Lyles a C because I just felt it was an average, kind of standard, not really memorable season. A large part of that was because of injuries, and I'm hoping or expecting next season with hopefully good health, knock on wood, with 70-plus games played, he can have more of those big performances, can shoot the you-know-what out of the rock. We know that Trey Lyles has stepped up in a major way as a vocal leader and locker room leader for this Kings team. He also has that mean side to him, whether he's grabbing Brook Lopez by the throat or being kind of that enforcer on the court. That's a role that Trey Lyles does not mind. Plus, he has his awesome book club. That's not a joke. Trey Lyles loves to read. So I expect Trey Lyles to be here in the future. I expect him to be great. Or really solid for Sacramento off the bench. Don't have any concerns about that whatsoever. I just thought this year, because of everything that happened, it was an overall just meh year for Trey, and my grade reflects that. So share with me, what are your grades for Keon, for Davion, for Trey? What are your grades for the other 6 guys that I've given grades for? I still have 3 more grades to give out. I know there are more players on the roster than just 3 more, but I'm limiting it because I don't really need to go too deep into the weeds of grades for JaVale McGee or Chris Duarte, I feel like. Plus, most of them are going to be low and not really impactful. The last show of this series, I'm going to focus on Mike Brown. I'm going to focus on Monty McNair. And then I'm going to focus on Sasha Vezenkov. So that's going to be the final episode of this Sacramento Kings Report Card series coming up on the next episode tomorrow. And then Sunday, Mother's Day, NBA Draft Lottery. Kings have the best odds of the 13th overall pick. I think they have like a 3 or 4% chance of dropping to 14, and then a collectively like 4.5% chance or something like that to get into the top 4. They can't move up they can't move up to 12. They're either top 4, 13th, or 14th. Like, that's it. That's all that they can be. And they have like a 0.7% chance of getting the number 1 overall pick. I think it's like a 0.8% chance of number 2 overall, 0.9% chance for number 3 overall, and then like 1.2% chance for 4th overall. The Kings are going to pick 13th, right? But we'll get the actual draft lottery on Sunday. We'll know where the Kings are picking. We'll be able to talk about the value of that pick in the trade market on draft night at that point, and we'll be able to dive deep into potential prospects for the Sacramento Kings to consider drafting with the 13th pick if they decide to go that route. So we'll transition to more of a draft focus of this offseason, starting Mother's Day and going into the future weeks. So hope you will join me for that. Appreciate your support, as always, here on the Locked On Kings podcast, even throughout the offseason. Can't wait to have you join me on the next one. Until then, my name is Matt George. You've been listening to Locked On Kings, part of the Locked On Podcast Network.